All right, Real 2K rosters here, and we're going to be breaking down the New Orleans Pelicans, giving them a little bit of a season preview using my roster for NBA 2K24, the Real 2K rosters. 2K25 is around the corner. Game will be releasing in about 3 or 4 days, so I will be converting a lot of my work on the 2K24 to 2K25. It is worth noting that 2K25 went from 77 badges down to 40, which reduced the overall rating for a lot of players down by like 1 to 2 points. So I'm going to go in at the start of the year and figure out whether or not I need to adjust my overall rating scale, which is actually based on NBA 2K's scale itself. My goal is always to be as true to the NBA as possible when determining values for players. Ratings, badges, tendencies, etc., are based on 2K scales or a derivative of said scale. Their overall rating scale, if you aren't truly aware, is let's say 95 to 99 is an all time season. 90 to 94 is a superstar. 85 to 89 is just a regular star, your guy that would make the All-Star team. And I guess I should say superstar are generally your All-NBA locks or players who are candidates for the All-NBA team when healthy. And 85 to 89, not all these guys make the All-Star team. You know, it depends on whether or not there's injuries in the conference, but usually these guys are all in the conversation. And then 80 to 84 are your solid to above average starters. 75 to 79 are role players, basically your guys that litter the bench. This is going to be the vast majority of NBA players, probably like 200 players are within this range. And then fringe. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a more positive way to call this category, but it's basically the end of rotation, guys. I call it fringe rotation. 70 to 74, basically the guys that you have at the bottom of a roster. So that is the overall scale. Let's jump into the Pelicans themselves, breaking down what they did last season. They finished with a 49-33 record, which was seventh in the Western Conference, coached by Willie Green. They had an SRS rating, of just Basketball References version of plus minus adjusted for strength of schedule, 4.46, which was fifth in the NBA. They are just sixth in flat net rating at 4.5. 117.4 offensive rating, which is points per 100 possessions, so 117 points per 100, which was 11th in the NBA, and then 112.9 on the defensive side, 7th in the NBA. So they were extremely efficient, and they actually had an expected win-loss record of 52-30, so they actually underperformed that by about 3 wins. As far as what they did outside of the regular season, they lost to the Lakers in the 7-8 play-in as Zion got hurt towards the end of that game, and then beat the Kings in the 8-9 play-in to actually make the playoffs, where they were unceremoniously stomped by the OKC Thunder. And by stomped, I mean swept. It was not a competitive series. And yeah, that's basically where the Pelicans are at. So they underperformed. They have a lot of quality starters on this team, but the core of the team, they don't really fit well together. And so they made some changes during the offseason to kind of rectify that. It's a solid 50-win regular season team, but because the pieces don't really fit well together, they're going to have limited playoff upside. I don't expect them to really make a second round of the playoffs until they fix some more of their core issues, which I'll get into in a second. So their off-season goals were to find a starting point guard as CJ McCollum. Not really a point guard, more of a two guard, playing the one just because he's undersized. They needed to find a starting center as Jonas Valanciunas. No longer with the team. He did not really fit with Zion Williamson, as they're both interior bruisers and not the greatest in terms of defense. Usually, you want at least one of your frontline guys to be an all defense caliber guy. And then trade Brandon Ingram was another goal, as the team's not willing to offer him a max extension. So either he needs to settle for less than that, or the team, it's going to look to move him. He is a free agent at the end of the year. And his game just doesn't really mesh with Zion. Another player who isn't much of a defensive player, really just an offense-first guy, similar to like a Zach LaVine in Chicago. Obviously a lot healthier than LaVine has been over the last couple of years. And also CJ McCollum, he makes a lot of money on this team, something like 33 million, I believe. May not even be the starter on this team now that the team acquired DeJounte Murray, who so they had 4 goals this year, this offseason. Get a point guard, get a center, trade CJ, trade Ingram. They accomplished one of those by acquiring DeJounte Murray from the Atlanta Hawks in exchange for uh, Larry Nance Jr., Dyson Daniels, and then EJ Liddell and Cody Zeller were throw-ins in that. They also got 2 future first-round picks, being the Lakers 2025 first-round pick and either the Pelicans or Bucks 2027 first-round pick, whichever is least favorable. Top 4 protected. That's always a little bit outside the scope of NBA 2K, as you can't put protections on any of these picks. You actually can't even move the picks in the rosters, at least on the PS5 and the Xbox. I think you can on the PC. Um, the PC is going to be next gen this year, so I may make the jump to PC on a related note. We'll see. It depends really on whether or not PC rosters are cross-platform with PlayStation or Xbox. But so yeah, that was their big trade. The New Orleans Pelicans made was getting their starting point guard in DeJounte Murray. They also signed. They made a couple signings. They brought in Daniel Tice and Javonte Green, and then they re-signed Matt Ryan. All of these guys 2 minimum contracts, which is noteworthy because the players who departed, Jonas Valanciunas, who we went to before. He was a sign and trade to the Wizards for 3 years and $30 million, $10 million per year. And then Najee Marshall also departed this team. He is now with the Dallas Mavericks, projecting to be probably their starting, not their starting 3, but their their 6-man, unless he starts at the 4 for PJ Washington in something like a small ball type of lineup. But he got 3 years, $27 million out of the Dallas Mavericks, and the New Orleans Pelicans just let both of those guys walk and then replace them with 2 minimum contract players. So, they did decrease their team quality just a little bit, even though they did bring in Murray. They also said goodbye to Larry Nance, Dyson Daniels, Zeller, Liddell, and they did not bring back Darian Sebron, I assume that's how you say his name, who was on a 2-way. But they also brought in, via the draft, Antonio Reeves, who was the 47th pick, and Yves Missi, who was the 21st pick, I believe. I'll break down some of their skills a little bit later. And also they signed draft and stash prospect Carlo Matkovic to a 3-year deal. The first 2 of those are guaranteed. Third year is a team option. He was the 52nd pick, I believe, back in 2022. So they bring over one of their former second-round picks, and they're basically cobbling together the center position. They did not bring in a starting center at all to replace Jonas Valanciunas. Daniel Tice was a backup center, really a third string for most of the last 2 years, and now he projects to be their starting center. So there is that the Pelicans are going to have to work their way through. Ideally, if they trade CJ or Ingram, they would bring back a starting center, but we'll see. And then projecting their... Oh, sorry. Also, they, for the completeness, the 2-way guys, they claimed to trade Jemison the third off of waivers from the Memphis Grizzlies on a 2-way. He's actually 25 years old, and which is older than 2 of the other rookie centers that they brought in. And even though he's on a 2-way, he might actually factor into the rotation. He might actually be the backup center starting off the season. And then we'll see what happens going from there. And then Jamal Cain they brought in from the Miami Heat. Miami, they are very good at getting these guys, these 2-way guys that end up having really good careers. They have so many of them now that they just don't have space for them anymore. So Cain looking to make his mark in New Orleans. Extension eligibility. We discussed Brandon Ingram before. He's a free agent at the end of the year, and that's one of the reasons why the team is going to be looking to move him is they're probably at an impasse in contract talks, and They need to get some kind of value for him if he's not going to stay with the team that he's been with for the last 5 years. And part of the problem, or one of the reasons why they don't want to give him a max extension, is they are going to have to pay Trey Murphy, who has more or less is going to eclipse Ingram. He's a much better fit on the team, a little bit younger, so he fits the timeline better. And because he's a good 3-point shooter, his skill set just fits much better than Ingram's does. Zion, not a good shooter. The centers, not shooters. Ingram, not a volume 3-point shooter, and that's essentially what they need out of wing player, because they also start Herb Jones as well. So they just desperately need shooting, and not of the mid-range variety, of the 3-point variety. So Trey Murphy, fantastic fit, and he has an extension deadline of October 21st, so a little under 2 months from now. We're recording on August 31st, I should say. And then Jose Alvarado, he's somebody that I project will probably definitely sign an extension. He has made very little money in the course of his career, basically minimum. He signed a 4-year minimum contract or more a minimum valued contract for 4 years, and he was immediately worth way more than that. So they've gotten a huge bargain on him the last couple of years. So for a player that you don't want to go into your free agency with the risk of risking injury or whatnot. So I do expect that he would sign for something probably team friendly ish, like probably less than $10 million. Let's say $8 million per, something like that. He's a little worse than guys like T.J. McConnell is the most recent player to sign an extension. I just want Jose to get his money. This is going to be probably his. He's already 26 and he's been on a minimum deal for 4 years. So he's going to be 30 if he signs a 4-year extension or something like that by the time he's a free agent. So this is going to be where the most of his money in his career comes from. Projected free agents, aside from those three guys, all the guys that they signed to minimum deals: Javonte Green, Tice, Jeremiah Robinson Earl. They picked up his team option, so he will be a free agent at the end of the year. And Antonio Reeves, his contract's 50% guaranteed. I don't expect him to move on from that. And then technically Matt Ryan, although I don't think Matt Ryan's actually going to make the team. His deal is non-guaranteed, and they're probably going to save money going into the year. He's more or less Brandon Ingram insurance. Like if there's an Ingram trade, they still have a small forward under contract, and they definitely need shooting. But otherwise, without a trade, I expect them to keep the roster spot open. He is the 15th man, especially because his team is in the luxury tax, which they hate paying. They let all these guys go, like Valanciunas and Marshall, for financial reasons, and only brought in guys on minimums. So they did not want to pay the tax. They did not want to go into the second apron or anything like that. So these are all considerations for the Pelicans as well. Unfortunately, in real life, it's not quite as simple as NBA 2K. Let's just break down everybody on the roster, starting from the top. So in the superstar tier, we've got Zion Williamson at a 90 overall, the number 6 power, my number 6 power forward in the NBA. The 5 players above him were all NBA. Which I believe is Giannis, LeBron, KD, Jason Tatum, and Kawhi. So he is the first one among those guys that's not all NBA. And the vast majority of those guys are actually natural threes. So if you wanted to really argue, he's really like the number 2 power forward in the NBA behind Giannis. But I digress. Last year, he did not make the All-Star team, but he is a 2-time All-Star. It was actually the healthiest season of his career, so he had a pretty good case. He played 70 games, career high, but got hurt during the play-in and then missed the first round, and that was pretty much it for their season. He had a career high 26.5 assist percentage. The offense ran through him rather than CJ. He was essentially the point forward of this team. Expect that to decrease, though, with Murray as a traditional point guard, though. And that's probably, though, for the best, because he had only a 61 true shooting percentage, down from 65% in 2023 and 2021. So, playing more on the ball definitely hurt his field goal percentage. More lobs would definitely help him in terms of his efficiency. He only had 78 dunks in 70 games. So, that was a significantly lower dunk rate than what he normally produces, and in fact, the lowest dunk rate of his career. So, getting back to more of a traditional system, I think, would help Zion a little bit. And then Brandon Ingram at an 89 overall. He's a former All Star, although he last made it in 2020. It's already been 5 years. And he was just awful in the playoffs this season with Zion out. Being guarded by Lou Dort, he averaged 14 points on 35% from the field, 25% from three. His 27% usage during the regular season was his lowest in 5 years with New Orleans. Basically, a healthy Zion and CJ McCollum's presence on the team affected that. They just don't need his volume scoring the way that they used to if Zion is going to be healthy. And as alluded to before, only 4.1 3-point attempts per 36 minutes. Despite playing with Zion, Jonas, and Herb Jones, they just need more of a 3-point presence from him if he is going to be in that starting lineup, and ultimately why the team wants to pivot to Trey Murphy. DeJounte Murray, 88 overall. And I'm sorry, Ingram, actually, I have him rated as the number 6 small forward in the NBA. DeJounte Murray, of course, it is worth noting that a lot of those natural small forwards actually play the power forward position technically. So if you were to put all those guys at the 3, he's really like the 10th best guy, something like that. DeJounte Murray, 88 overall, is the number 14 point guard in the NBA. He was an All Star in the 2022 season. And over the last 2 years, he has been playing the 2 guard next to Trey Young, more or less miscast in that role. He ended up not being enough of a defensive factor as a 2 guard in order to make it worth pairing with Trey Young. Like, he wasn't able to counteract Trey Young not existing on defense. And he was just like too small to guard up a position, which is what 2 guards typically have to do. He's not going to have to do that with Herb Jones around to guard everything from 2 to 4s. So they really just want him to run the offense, which last year as he did fairly well when Trey got hurt. His assist numbers kind of went back to normal, what they were with the San Antonio Spurs. But he had a 28% assist rate last year, a 1.9 steal percentage. Back in 2022, when he was with the Spurs, he had a 41 assist percentage, which was fifth in the NBA, and a 2.8 steal percentage, which was third in the NBA. He is a former All Defensive Team member, although that was way back in 2018 when I believe he was a rookie or a second-year player. So that is what they are hoping that he will do with their starting lineup at the point guard position. Run more pick and rolls, and be able to be a good point of attack defender, get into the passing lanes, get more steals. That's something that they certainly weren't getting from CJ McCollum. And I guess it is worth noting that Murray, playing the question that he had with the Spurs is similar to like Brandon Ingram. He was a mid-range master, but didn't really provide much in terms of 3-point shooting. He was only a 4.5 per 36 minutes, 4.5 attempts on threes, and only shot 33% back then. But last year, he improved over the last 2 years. 7.2 threes attempted per 36 and shot 36%. So that's way more respectable. And so he's improved as a catch and shoot player, but also does a lot of that off the dribble as well. So that's something that certainly helps him be a legit, I would say, all-star, low level all-star caliber player. Whereas with the Spurs, it was kind of like a little fool's goldie. He was putting up numbers on a bad team. I think now he's more able to step into the role of a starting point guard on like a playoff team. But CJ McCollum, he functioned more as a 2 guard rather than as a starting point guard. Only a 21 assist percentage, which was less than both Zion and Ingram. So he's only third in the starting lineup in assist rate. So he was operating more as a 2 guard. He did catering more to that, exemplifying that, I should say. He had a career high 43 3-point percentage, on 9.3 3-point attempts per 36, which was the second highest rate of his career. So that just shows that he was, in fact, doing a lot off the ball. And I don't know what I have him right now as the backup point guard on this team. He's probably going to get minutes at both positions as they need to find 30 minutes per game essentially for all these guys. Um, Depth chart purpose wise, the reason why I have him at the one is like Jordan Hawkins is going to continue to get minutes for this team. Antonio Reeves, both these guys are kind of like too small to be small forwards. Realistically, if they trade Ingram, I would probably put CJ at the two, move Herb Jones to the three, and then Murphy is still like the sixth man. Or you could start Murphy and bring Herb Jones off the bench as like the super six man, defend everything, kind of PJ Tucker vibes level of player. But I do expect Jose Alvarado, for example, to be a little marginalized with the presence of Murray. Which is why I kind of felt like it was appropriate to change McCollum's position just to kind of reflect that. So even if Murray and CJ are both starting, CJ's going to get all of the backup point guard minutes, and Alvarado's really not going to be in the rotation. I do expect Alvarado to extend and to be a longer term part of the team than CJ McCollum. It's just outside of at the outset, the way that the team is currently constructed, this is more or less what I've got. But moving on to Herb Jones, who was all defense first team this year, the first selection of his career. He finished fifth in Defensive Player of the Year, and yeah, he guards everybody 2 through 4. He was a big part of why the Pelicans were seventh defensively, despite starting Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, and Jonas Valanciunas and CJ McCollum. Like he's basically all of the defensive value on that team, and he improved as a 3-point shooter as well. Was only 34% from three over his prior 2 seasons, but he upped that to 42% on 4.2 3-point attempts per 36. So 4.2 3-point attempts is more than Brandon Ingram 4.1, which again just shows how like at Ingram, what did he shoot? I think 35% or 36%, something like that. So Ingram just not providing the 3-point value. Jones was at least able to establish himself as a more credible 3-and-D player, a big part of why the offense was able to click throughout the year, regardless of who was in the lineup. So really good season for him. They're looking for him to continue upon that. I don't know if he's going to be a 42% 3-point shooter, but mid 30s, upper mid 30s, I think is probably pretty realistic as like his like average like floor of where he's at. And then Trey Murphy, we've been talking a lot about him. 38% on threes, but on a very high volume of 9.5 3-point attempts per 36 minutes. And what's crazy about him is he does not turn the ball over at all. 4.7 turnover percentage, which is first in the NBA. 5.6% for his career, so he's been doing this for a long time. 3.6 assist to turnover ratio is ridiculously good for a 3-and-D guy. It's not even that he's getting like a ton of assists or anything. He just never ever turns it over. And unlike a lot of 3-and-D guys who are just threes only, he's still a great rim finisher. A career 74% at the rim. Very good lob threat for his position. So just another added wrinkle of what makes him a starting caliber 3. And somebody who, if they did trade Ingram, might be able to sneak into like most improved player conversations because it would just improve his stock quite a bit, and just because he fits so well next to everybody, similar to like a Tyrese Maxey of last year, where he was already getting the minutes, but giving him the optimal role is what allowed him to kind of take off a little bit. I do think that Murphy would benefit from just being erasing Ingram and just getting a lot more of those touches. Let's who's next? Jose Alvarado. I did touch on him a little bit. One of the reasons why I do think that he should do the extension is he is a little injury prone. 117 games played out of 164 over the last 2 years. That's only 71% of possible games played. And worth noting, only 15% assist rate. Zion and Ingram, again, they run the offense. He's more of like a Patrick Beverly type. 38 3-point percentage on 7.2 3-point attempts per 36. So he is doing a pretty good Beverly impression there. And as alluded to before, he just might not have the minutes available with Murray and CJ on this team. So something to keep an eye on. And because he makes such little money, he's not even a realistic like trade candidate because you'd never be able to get like good value for him. Nobody's going to trade like a first rounder for him or anything. I wouldn't trade a second for him because he's too valuable of a player. So I do think that it's CJ or somebody else that's going to be on the move. Daniel Theis, the first center that we've talked about, he was a starter in Boston and Houston from 2020 to 2022, and then was buried with Indiana. Made an impact for the Clippers, who he signed with when Mason Plumlee got hurt. So overall, the rub on him is he's undersized but solid defensively. He's a better rim protector than Jonas Valanciunas, 4.5% block rate, but a way worse rebounder at 17%, a 17 defensive rebound percentage. So, whereas like I think Jonas was top 5 in the league, something like 30%. Defensive rebound percentage, and it is worth noting that I didn't go over the weaknesses, strengths and weaknesses for a lot of the top guys. I think most people know what they are for them, but Zion was not a good rebounder. Part of that is some of those rebounds are going to Jonas. So with Theis on the team, everybody's going to have to rebound the ball a little more, if especially if Theis is going to end up being the starting center. There are other players that they could acquire in an Ingram trade. I don't want to go over like it's not worth it to really speculate, but like someone like a Clint Capella, for example, is somebody who might be available, and he would make a lot of sense as like a shot blocker rebounder on this team. More or less a higher end version of Daniel Theis because he is a better finisher, I would say, a better offensive player overall. But yeah, he's currently the starting center in the for the Pelicans. Projects to be like the worst of starting center in the NBA, but still a starter. And hey, if they sign him for a minimum contract, so pretty good value, right? But yeah, definitely a situation to keep an eye on moving forward. Javonte Green, he looked healthy. He was. I really liked him with the Bulls a couple years ago, and then he had a knee injury and missed most of the last 2 years. Re-signed with the Bulls late in the year last season, and he looked really healthy. Was my big takeaway. He played 9 games and 230 minutes with Chicago, and his numbers are ridiculous in that time. He had a 20 player efficiency rating, which is really good. 68 true shooting and 9.5 offensive rebound percentage, 23 defensive rebound percentage, 2.2 steal percent, 3.6 block percent. So I don't anticipate that he's going to maintain all of those rates. It is worth noting that I don't buy into advanced stats very much on a sample of less than like 300 to 500 minutes. But those numbers aren't terribly far from like what he did for his career. If he does what he did, what his career numbers are something like 62 true shooting, like 8 offensive rebound, 22 not I'm sorry 14 defensive rebound, 2 something steals, I think 2 something blocks. Like that's really good. He is another undersized player. He is a 4 rather than in a 3's body, which is worth noting. At least he fits with the trend, right, of Zion being an undersized 4 and Theis being an undersized 5. But yeah, not like a volume 3-point shooter. Not something that you'd really be able to pair with the Brandon Ingram, but he might make a lot of sense next to Trey Murphy on the second units. Yeah, and again on a minimum contract, I think it's a pretty reasonable deal. Jordan Hawkins had a solid rookie season. Was the number 14 pick last season. Hit 30. He's a 3-point shooter and shot 37% on 9.2 3-point attempts per 36. So definitely somebody they're going to be looking to spread the floor, especially since again they have a lot of non-shooters on this team as currently constructed, and his value only goes up in the event of a CJ trade, and that those are the four role players that I expect to basically be I think this is the top nine for this team. Three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine. Oh no, that's their top 10. Alvarado, yeah, more. So they're going to have a nine-man rotation with Alvarado getting spot minutes here and there as like a defensive specialist at point guard. And then these are the guys that are more or less going to be out of the rotation for this team. Antonio Reeves, I'm pretty high on him. He's pretty old as a rookie. I think he was a 5-year college player. He is 23 years old despite being a rookie, which is why I have him at a 75 overall. You might say, you might be thinking I'm like 2K Sports, who they gave all the second round picks like 70 overall ratings, which that doesn't make sense because it's not accounting for like how much actual experience they have. Uh, Antonio Reeves, he's 23 years old, so he's a lot closer to his ceiling than like the average rookie. So even though he's a 75 as a rookie, his prime years are going to be like 27. So he might only go up like a couple points between now and then. Whereas somebody like a Ronnie James, for example, is coming in low. I personally have him at a 70 overall, but 2K's got him at a 68. Like that makes sense because he has the floor on him is pretty low because he's still so young and has a lot of development to do. Antonio Reeves more or less a finished product. He's a great scorer and shooter. Reminds me a lot of Alec Burks, which I think is a pretty good comp for him. Can't really run the offense as well as like an Alec Burks could, but probably a higher end shooter. Shot something like 45% from three, I think, in college. Pretty good free throw shooter as well. Was able to score well from mid range. Pretty good driver. Not much of a passer or defender, but again, for a team that might be trading Brandon Ingram, I think this is a pretty reasonable insurance policy just to have another volume scorer on the team. Um, Jeremiah Robinson Earl, he's a tweener 4-5, career 34% 3-point shooter. He's more or less the closest thing to a stretch five on the roster. Um, Going over to their bigs, yeah, Zion's not a shooter. Green's not a big man. Um, Tice actually, you know what? It is worth noting. Tice, he doesn't have the volume, but he can hit a three. So that is, but that's he doesn't shoot them in volume, similar to like Jonas Valanciunas. Valanciunas is something like a 35, 36% shooter for his career too, but he only takes like one per game. And Tice is more or less in that same boat. I think JRE takes a little more than that, probably something like 3 to 4 per game. And Karlo Matkovic, who we'll get to in a minute, was also a decent shooter in the G League, but the other two guys, like Yves Missi, I think he's taken like one shot outside of the paint in his fucking career. Like he's absolutely not a 3-point threat. So that's basically the role that JRE's going to fill for this team. He's an okay rebounder, not so much, not a great finisher. At the rim, at least, pretty good, like on hook shots and stuff like that in the paint itself, but at the rim, he's kind of a below the rim type of player. Matt Ryan, who, as I mentioned before, probably not making the team due to financials. He's Ingram trade insurance, but he is a very good 3-point shooter. That is his NBA skill, but doesn't do a whole heck of a lot else. He's not a good finisher at the rim by any stretch. He's really just a 3-point shooter. Doesn't rebound the ball well. Not a passer, defensive playmaker, not even a rebounder or anything. So, and he's 27 years old, so he is what he is at this point. Kind of like a quadruple A player, like too good for the minors, not good enough for the majors. That's more or less where he's at. And then Karlo Matkovic, who I'm pretty high on, but we don't have a ton of sample on him. He played 10 games in the G League last season. Had a 21.5 player efficiency rating, 70 true shooting, 10 offensive rebound percentage, 18% defensive, and then 4.5 block percentage. So the 70 true shooting is definitely worth keeping an eye on. I do think he's an above the rim player. More like he's a really good pick and roll player. I wouldn't describe him as like he doesn't have great verticality. He is only 6'10", So maybe like his standing dunk rate maybe should be like a 75, and maybe his driving dunk rate like an 85, because most of what he does is like he's like a lob threat in the pick and roll, but not somebody who can stand at the rim in the dunker spot and finish all that well. You're definitely going to want somebody like an Yves Misi in that type of spot. But overall, he's got like solid overall all around game. He's more of like a traditional power forward than like a straight up five. He does have a little bit of ball handling ability. Decent post player. Has an outside shot. Um, but again, based on like the sample, only 10 games in the G League, and it's not a ton to read into at the international level. His rebound rate wasn't as high as I would like it to be. Really, nobody on this team posted a good defensive rebound percentage at any point in their career, so that's something the team is definitely going to have to figure out now that Valanciunas is gone. Um, and then Yves Misi, um, I have him at a 72 overall, despite being the number 21 overall pick. He is a project. He's the youngest player on this team at age 20. 96% of his field goal attempts in college came at the rim. He is a dunker and a dunker only, or a guy that gets like offensive putbacks and whatnot. Similar to like a Mitchell Robinson. He's a Mitchell Robinson type of project. Mitchell Robinson, of course, was drafted in the second round. And that's probably where Misi would have went in a like higher caliber of draft class. So he's a pretty reasonable reach for the Pelicans here because they do need a center, but I'm not expecting a ton, and it wouldn't surprise me if he was just a third string for the entire year. Um, Trey Jemison III, I mentioned before. He's 25 years old, has more pro experience than the other two centers on this team. So he might, and he even started games last year for the shorthanded Memphis Grizzlies. So he might end up being like the backup center out of the gate. We'll see. But overall, he's a pretty good rebounder. That actually might be his biggest strength. Oh no, never mind. He's another guy who can't grab a defensive rebounder, but pretty good on the offensive end. Pretty good shot blocker. So yeah, he's just a better version of what Misi is. And also at 260 pounds, he does have more bulk than Misi. Misi's more of a length guy, like a Mitchell Robinson, whereas Jamison's probably the guy that they are going to have to call on to guard somebody like Valanciunas or Joel Embiid or Nikola Jokic, etc. And finishing out the rest of the two-way guys, I mentioned with Jamal Cain, he's similar to like a Javonte Green type, reasonable insurance. If he can develop he shot well on a low volume last year on his three ball, but overall, I'm not sure how sticky that is. He hasn't played a ton of minutes in his career, something like 500. But like a Javonte Green type of player has a little more size than Javonte Green. Worthwhile flyer on a two-way, and then Malcolm Hill, who hasn't played an NBA minute he's played 9 minutes over the last 2 seasons. He did not play any games last season, despite signing a two-way with the Pelicans. So he's another guy who's like more or less a 3-and-D guy. Can hit a three, but doesn't do a ton else. He is on the older side for a two-way guy, but for a playoff team or a playoff hopeful, that's a pretty good value. They'd probably rather have a 28-year-old than an 18-year-old, for example, on a two-way, as they are going to be looking to compete for a playoff spot. But yeah, that is the New Orleans Pelicans. If you liked this video and the content that it entailed, please like the video, as that helps the algorithm, and subscribe, all that jazz. I am going to have an update to my 2K25 plans for my Patreon and the spreadsheet that I have. But I'm going to break that down in a later video, or once I have something more concrete. But I just wanted to put it out there that things will be changing, and I don't want to promote it until I'm 100% sure of exactly what we're going to be doing there. But I should be continuing along next season with that, so be on the lookout for news on that. And otherwise, thank you guys for watching, and keep an eye out for another. I'm going to try to bust out one more of these before 2K25 releases, and then we're going to be doing some 2K25 content. Thanks again for watching. Peace.